This is Tim Murdock. You're watching White Rabbit Radio Live for Friday, May 23rd. And today we have a first hour guest, Mr. No White Guilt. He had me on his show a while back. I hadn't talked to him in quite a while. It was an interesting conversation, and I wanted to have him on again to talk here for a bit about some words. And how's everything going, Jason?
It couldn't be better. And thank you so much for having me on. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's always good to see you. The White House had this little festival. I was like having like flashbacks of like, it was kind of like an intimate gathering, kind of like a small white nationalist conference, except they had a lot of black people from South Africa. And you had a president saying, "Dim the lights." And he rolled a video as like, oh, Amrit or something. And it was a collage of white crosses, really, is what comes to my mind, of dead white people in South Africa. And, you know, the press really doesn't like, they're always trying to ignore anything that bad happens to whites. It's an accident. It's a coincidence. It's a one-off thing. Don't make it out to be something it isn't. If it's the other way around, if whites are the perpetrators, well, that's never the case. But if they're the victims, they're just ignoring it. It's like this program they're running. It's just not running anymore. It's just not working with a lot of people. And South Africa is always that one spot in the universe where anyone looking at it with half a brain is like, something's not right here.
Yeah, to your point, anything that contradicts their anti-white narrative, they want to bury, they deny, they claim is not happening, they claim is not bad as it is. And if it is that bad, then it is misunderstood. But if it's understood correctly, then it's not race-based and not going after white people on the basis of race. And then if they are going after white people on the basis of race, well, then it's because white people deserve it. That's really how the anti-whites work with the anti-white narrative. And yeah, if white people are the perpetrators, exactly. Or if they can just fictionalize reality and make us the perpetrators, make the whole white race guilty of any individual's crimes, whether present or in the past, they'll happily do that because that comports with the anti-white narrative. And unfortunately, since our people are trained over the course of their lives with news and entertainment media, but primarily the entertainment media, to understand that the anti-white narrative is the real world, even when it isn't, these reports confirm to them what they already understand about the world. And so it's not just a matter of coming like to a blank slate population and saying, hey, this really isn't happening to white people in South Africa. It's going to a group of people that already believe in their marrow, the vast majority of us, that it's not happening or that it's not race-based or that it's just lawlessness in a country that's disintegrating. So unfortunately, it does play to the benefit of the anti-whites. But when you have the anomaly, Donald Trump, and he's just like, Cyril Ramaphosa has no idea this is going to happen. It was glorious. And Trump's just like, yeah, let's dim the lights. They got a little video I want to play. And the look on this anti-white pig's face was priceless. And his entire delegation, none of them knew that this was going to happen. And he just hammered them with this. But I do want to say, though, something that is true is even though Donald Trump has been driven to this iteration of himself by Democrat anti-whites trying to destroy him and his family, would he still have done this if it weren't for the fact that the South African government is at odds with the Israeli government just a past few months ago, and the statements that they made about Israel and in Palestine? I mean, would Trump in that? But I guess we don't have to really speculate whether or not it would happen or not. It's another universe.
Well, he called it. He's using a phrase that is, genocide is an international crime. It has no statute of limitations, so it does seem like a threat.
Yeah,
which is a good phrase to have around. It's good to have around a criminal accusation with no statute of limitations. Why not just have it around? Yeah, he didn't come back and say, well, all right, the magically disappearing whites in South Africa. They're always over semantics. They want to say, it's not genocide, it's not this or not that. Well, they're magically disappearing over and over again. And then he had this, this huge pile of recent news reports. And it's just some of the most graphic stuff that you can get your hands on. It always has been. It always triggers people. It always draws an immediate reaction. South Africa. And the ideal that it's in the Oval Office and at that level is kind of surreal. But I wonder myself, is it some type of negotiation gambit with like, well, you're going to have to drop your ICC case against the Israelis, or we're going to, some kind of deal, because it started the deal. I haven't seen any action, but at the same time, there's another individual involved, Elon Musk, and South Africa sits on enormous amounts of natural resource wealth. And that's what they're looking at too. We got a lot of businessmen saying, this Ramaphosa, this whole entire thing, we need to redesign it, maybe give the Boers their autonomy. Even on Tucker Carlson, which I was really surprised he had on the board, and I forget his name, someone attached to that. He had him on, and Tucker, to my surprise, said, well, you're going to have independent, you're going to have self-determination, and you're going to have a larger power back you up in that, so you can fight. So I'm like, okay, so he actually knows. But the thing I fear the most is that, unless President Trump's willing to send in the Marines, a lot of bad things can happen, because they want to, like, these handful of refugees, which I've never seen 50 refugees cause such a concern. We've had 50 white refugees before from different places, by the way. It's pretty rare. But we have had a few, whether it be from Ukraine or whatever. We've had a few. And this is like, oh, man. It's like Armageddon for these people.
The South African whites, our people, us, really represent one of the pinnacle demons in the white race. And the creation of that country, they absolutely despise the white South Africans, anti-whites do. And they want to see the ultimate victimization happen there. That's why you see them coming unglued throughout the media and across social media, where they're saying these people deserve, this is what they should be mistreated this way. They should be murdered this way. They should have their land taken from them this way. We had this guy, and we looked a couple of weeks back on these anti-white professor who was talking about how, the white population in South Africa, he said, is only 7%, but they hold 70% of the farming territory. And I pointed out the white population of South Africa was 100% white. It was 100% because we created the country. There was no South Africa. And so now, as a consequence of anti-whiteism, we're down to 7% in South Africa, and plummeting quickly. And of course, I know you must have seen and covered as well how they're moving to take the rest of the land away from the whites, less of the real property away from our people there. And I hope we'll see. They came to the White House and they wanted to get money. Cyril wanted money from the United States. He wanted to make a deal, and then pretended like he had no idea what was happening. He even asked Trump, I don't know if you caught it, where is this? Where is this happening? And Trump's like, I don't know, South Africa, you're the president. How do you not know? This is the people in your government.
These are thousands of crosses.
And the thousands of crosses on the sides of the highways. Of course, he knows exactly what's going on. But the really scary thing, brother, is that he knows, and he was there to put on a big smile and pretend like nothing was happening. Biden knew. Trump before today knew. Putin knows. Everyone knows in the governments around the world that this is happening to the white race, that we're being systematically persecuted, not only, of course, in South Africa, but there it's most poignant because of the things like the gang rape and ritualistic beheadings and everything of our people there, but everywhere in the West. And if not for Donald Trump in this mood, maybe it had something to do with South Africa, insulting Israel as well. Who knows? If not for these things, this would not have been done in the Oval Office. And so it's a little peek behind the curtain of the horror that is really inflicted on us as a people and planned for us as a people.
I don't know whether South Africa seems to be the beginning of the programming, the modern programming. It has something to do, in other words, the program that they're running was slow going, but South Africa, the apartheid, the anti-apartheid, this is where post 65, it really like jumps in the 80s. It jumps the curb and it starts going whole hog, white genocide, for lack of a better phrase, white erasure, as you say. Magically disappearing whites. This is where it really looks like it was a test run for what they want to do everywhere. And that might be why they're fighting so hard as well. But their instincts are to fight to the death. They run the same program no matter what.
Yes. Yeah,
and
precisely.
they are going all in. Maybe he realizes some of that. I don't know how much Elon Musk has to do with it because he was denied. He can't do Starlink there unless he gives up a third of his company to a black guy. Lucky black guy. Black lottery. And he's upset. He's discriminated against for being from South Africa. But he's never really said too much about it up until then.
Yeah.
And he's got a lot of money. You do a lot with that kind of money. You're one of the richest man in the world, is what they say.
You're making a great point there. I mean, he really hasn't said much. He's been one of the wealthiest for a very long time. And of course, the wealthiest as of late. And said very little about what's happening to our people there in South Africa, his home, and what's happening to our people there. But now there are some business opportunities there. And suddenly it is, hey, what about all of the persecution of the white people there? It's really bad, by the way. We should make some changes, and I should be able to conduct business there free of the trammels of the anti-white laws, the hundreds and hundreds of them.
Doesn't work that way, though. It doesn't work that way. If you don't, this is the problem. If you allow PayPal to start banning even people you don't like in groups, even people we don't like in various different groups that are labeled like Klan or whatever, Ku Klux Klan, as soon as that starts, this goes back to Whitaker, they're going to ban everything. They're not going to stop there. That's why you can't allow any of this stuff. But they've allowed it for so many decades. Now it's like they're scratching their heads, what do you do? They actually want to genocide us.
Yeah, it really got to that point. What do we do now?
Yeah, I'm curious to see what they do next and what they plan on, what their plans are for South Africa. It could be a combination of things. Natural resources. I mean, the Chinese are in there. They might want to get them out of there.
Yeah.
But for Tucker Carlson to say self-determination and then say, well, you're going to need military help because he has Trump's phone number. I don't. And so that kind of surprised me that they're even thinking of that. But the private property, I think the taking of private property is something that really bothers these elites by the various different African governments. But they allowed it to happen to Rhodesia, right? So Rhodesia would have been the first test. South Africa was a very over-the-top test, but you allowed it. It's not going to stop. They're going to bring it in some form all over everywhere they can. It's always the same gambit, using black populations or underprivileged brown populations, The
privileged groups.
The quote unquote, yes. But anyways, I wanted to, we'll come back to some of these points. I wanted to have you on to talk about the word anti-white. What's up, Global Chat? Thank you very much, sir. And thank you, Mr. Aaron White. I do appreciate the support. Desi Mac, I'm waiting for them to try that crap here. It won't work on you. It won't work on you. When it comes to the word anti-white, it's something I messed with for a long time. The debate was always over to capitalize or not to capitalize, to hyphen or to not to hyphen. Historically, the word anti-white, going back along decades upon decades, is not capitalized, and there's no hyphen. There's no hyphen. Of course, the word white, you really wouldn't capitalize in a normal white society. I probably would, but a lot of people wouldn't, because you wouldn't capitalize black, you wouldn't capitalize Latino, you wouldn't capitalize Asian. But post-65, they had a tendency to capitalize everything but white, which means you've got to capitalize white now. And a lot of people are now noticing these type of little things. So when it comes to the word anti-white, we've kind of always capitalized anti, the A and the W, just because when you capitalize something, you get noticed. It's kind of like someone talking in your chat in all caps, you kind of get noticed. Like, knock it off, doing that to make a statement. But the question about the hyphen, I'm curious on your thoughts, to hyphen or to not to hyphen. Hyphen does bring attention as well. I'm looking at Google AI. I was kind of surprised Google AI covered it. The correct phrasing is anti-white hyphen with a hyphen. While anti-white, I don't trust them at all. I'm just going to read it. While anti-white is a valid term, it's generally preferred to be in a hyphenated form, particularly when referring to discrimination or prejudice against white people. And they're talking about Merriam-Webster. I'm curious because historically, if we go back 100 years, it's not hyphenated, it's not capitalized. We're in different circumstances. So what is your feeling on all this?
Well, for me, it started when I, of course, did not know that it was in the dictionary. It was in none of the dictionaries that I had access to, City Library or my unabridged family dictionary. And so I thought about it, I tested it, and I concluded that, and it's interesting because 20 years after that, the Jews ended up agreeing with us in the decision that I ended up coming to, which is that without a hyphen, it's a single concept. And I wasn't capitalizing the W in the middle of the word either. But when I write the word white over the years, I've gone back and forth with whether or not I capitalize the W when the word white for our people stands alone. But when it comes to anti-white without a hyphen, I see that, and the population, and we can get into this, sees a word like that as a single concept, whereas the word anti-hyphen white is a double concept. Where is the strength? And this is the reason why I went with out a hyphen in both anti-white and anti-whiteism. The strength is with the authority on an introduced concept, on a complete singular concept, whereas the strength of interpretation is with the audience when it is a double concept, the concept anti, which the audience will define as they understand it, and the concept white, which the audience will define as they understand it. And then bringing those together, they will define as they understand it, which brings us to a very narrow definition of what anti-white means. That's important because these are the people, our brothers and sisters out there, that we have to persuade. We need them to understand what anti-white means as we define it. As we define it, it's a whole spectrum of behaviors, of thoughts, of opinions. As they might define it, it's very narrow. They understand the word anti to mean opposed or against. White, how do they define white people? There's going to be variations there. They're going to be people who say, well, the Mediterranean whites are not really white, and maybe the Teutons are more white than and there's going to be these kinds of conclusions. There are also going to be white people who conclude that, well, there aren't white, there is just Germanic, or there's just English. That's problematic for us because we are in the business of bringing our audience, the audience that matters for us, normative, healthy white people who are capable of hearing these arguments and coming to an understanding that we are being victimized as a group, and that's why they are victimized as individuals. We can't waste time on having a debate with them about what anti-white means.
Yeah, it should be kind of self-evident. And so
right.
You're putting it together for the same reason the Jews finally put anti-Semite together.
Precisely, yeah.
One concept, yeah.
Exactly, except we did it 20 years or before they did it.
This debate is waged in a couple little circles for a long, long time. This is not new. Of course, they just came to this conclusion, but yes. I've seen it. I've played with it both ways, but I do understand that it's entering the mainstream. It's well over mainstream. It's well over the target. And so taking the hyphen out, you think is superior because it's one concept.
It's one concept, and we get to define that concept. When a person reads a singular concept, they ask themselves, what does this mean? And who are the authorities who can tell me what it means? As opposed to a hyphenated concept where they can determine what anti and what white means. And I'll tell you this, having spoken with many thousands of white people over the years, ordinary folks who aren't in our circles, many of them find, for example, the idea that somebody could be anti-opposed to hyphen white people in general to be absurd, it's like a non-starter for them. Like, how can you be against this people? And the reason why they are coming to that erroneous conclusion is because they're allowed to define what those words mean. So when we get to define what those words mean, a great example of how this works is we would say that anti-white includes, the singular concept includes odious opinions about the white race. Well, somebody, the average white person out there, when they read anti-white, defining both of those concepts, are likely not to include negative opinions about white people. So it's like you can have negative opinions about mosquitoes and not be anti-mosquito. And that's how a lot of white people will process it if they're given the opportunity, especially in a climate where it's considered immoral, socially immoral, to stand up for white people collectively, to object to our victimization collectively. So really it comes down to, and I'll read just a tiny portion of what in 2015, the Jews finally, the exact same thing that we determined many years earlier. So we don't want to argue, as you just pointed out, we don't want to argue with our prospects about what anti-white means. We want to be able to define it for them and move into trying to persuade them and convince them that this is a problem for them and that they're victimized individually because the collective to which they belong, ineluctably belong, they cannot escape, that collective is victimized. So if we take, for example, also the scope of this gets larger and more problematic if you include the hyphen. When we're talking about the word anti-whiteism, do you
spell that with an E or do you take the E out?
Over the years, I've done both. I've done a bunch of tests over the years. I've ridden a lot of subway to work at DC and spoken with a lot of strangers. And most of the time, the experiments, the E on the end of white is necessary. When I show strangers and I say, what does this say? They say anti-whiteism when they see the E. When the E is not present, most of the time they say anti-whitism, and they don't know. Yeah, they don't know what that means. So even though the E technically is inaccurate in the word, it appears to be needed for people to understand. And then when they read anti-whiteism, I can't recall a time when a stranger ever got it wrong. They read anti-whiteism, and then I say, well, what is that? What do you think that is? And then they end up stumbling along quite briefly into, well, it must mean against white people. It must be an ideology against white people. And so that's exactly what we need to be able to do with our
offline, because online can be the real world. If you have the president playing Amarin style presentations on South African white genocide, I mean, one jumps to the other pretty quickly, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is how media works. But
let me just say, anti-whiteism, this is really important, brother, because if there's a hyphen in anti-whiteism, that means that there's something called whiteism. Our audience will be determining that. They will conclude that there is something called whiteism and that we must be for it. The reality is that there is nothing called whiteism, but if we allow the audience to determine that there is, they will give it a definition. And more specifically, malicious actors will give it a definition that means something contradictory to what we want. So they would go to our brothers and sisters out there in so many ways, and they say whiteism means exterminating all the non-white people or something along this line. Without the hyphen, though, there is no implication that there is something called whiteism for our audience to interpret on their own, and we as the authorities get to determine for them what that means, what anti-whiteism means. And it's a very easy concept to work with, because our brothers and sisters out there can understand these concepts independently. They know that ism means an ideology because we interact with it so often. And then we as the authorities can provide the details about what exactly anti-whiteism is and how anti-whites practice anti-whiteism and how Anti-whiteism is the superset that contains the subsets of things like DEI, of feminism, of on and on, that afflict us negatively in our lives.
What I've noticed for years, one of the reasons I've come back to this point, one of the reasons I had you on, and Global Chat makes a very good dono here with a comment, and this comment is I used to be of the same framework, but let me read it and let me correct this, because I'm going to make a point here that you can easily research. We're not going to reach all whites anyways. We need to concentrate on those who are receptive to an ideal. Hyphenation won't be a barrier. When I first got started, it was just kind of like plowing forward, and then the stuff became all over the place. And I started noticing something, the muddying of the waters. And every time I see the waters muddied over and over again, I see the hyphenation, anti-white racisms. Over and over again, I see the hyphenation. They never stop using the hyphenation. That's when we're kind of going back and forth like, well, maybe we shouldn't be hyphenating it. Just put the caps, anti-white in caps, no hyphen at all, because it seems like they're muddying the water when we do that. And this type of thing to the average person, it's kind of why I'm having on Jason. He writes books about this stuff. The average person makes the same comment, kind of like I did back in the day. Like, well, we're just going in this direction. Let's not do this. But we're not just going in this direction anymore. It does kind of matter to someone like me what I use, what I want to use. Should I use the E in whiteism? Because spell checkers will also mess you up, which is another problem. We don't control spell checkers.
Exactly.
AI will mess you up. We've got all that. Well, spell checkers are AI. But this is where I came into the actual agreement. Like, well, I'm going to start taking out the hyphen, because every time I research the articles where they muddied the water with anti-white racisms, they're always using the hyphen.
Yeah.
Always. I've never seen them not use the hyphen when they're muddying the waters.
Precisely. And this is, I think, part of the issue here that Global Chat might be having is that they sound the same.
They do.
And so shouldn't it be irrelevant? But it actually is not irrelevant. It's more relevant than antibiotic, a single concept. Antichrist, a single concept, without the C capitalized. Why are those relevant? Because in Antichrist, the church are the authorities, and they can tell you what it is, rather than their audience interpreting and then becoming problematic for them and their persuasion. Biotic means a living organism. If the population saw the words anti-biotic, they would see opposed to living organism. Very few people would want to take a medication that was opposed to living organisms. They are one. And so what would the authorities, the doctors have to do, the medical community? They would have to argue and debate with their audience about, well, what it really means. It doesn't actually mean that it kills all organisms. It only kills some organisms. And that, of course, if for nothing else, would be a problem. The other issue is that the idea that, and I've seen it as well forever, the idea that, well, we don't need to reach, and then the hyperbole, then the exaggeration, sort of, we don't need to get to all white people. It's not about getting to all white people. The argument that we don't need to get to all white people is used as a straw man in a presupposition that there are enough white people that already think a certain way, and that if they can just, etc. There are no such groups of people. There simply are not. There are many millions of moral white people that are ready, willing, and able, with power, with wealth, etc., to act in their own defense if they can be given a moral matrix through which to act in our defense, and an understanding that their individual well-being is only going to be guaranteed by way of our people's well-being. And so that's one of the big reasons why. But I'll read to you, and we were talking about, I just have this little note here, 2015. This is 20 years after we started using, at least I personally, and then so many of us were also using anti-whiteism without a hyphen. This is an international, and there were numerous international Jewish groups all at the same time. They came to the same conclusion. IHRA would like to address the spelling of the term anti-Semitism.
It's a big deal to them.
It's a big deal all of a sudden. So all these years later, and now watch as I read this, they come to the exact same conclusion. address the term anti-Semitism, also rendered as anti-S Semitism. The IHRA's concern is that the hyphenated spelling, listen to this, allows for the possibility of something called Semitism. Now, what are they actually?
so we should use the hyphen with anti-Semitism then.
Oh, man, yeah, exactly. Exactly, because if they're going to use the hyphen on us, what are they concerned about when it comes to the word Semitism? What they're concerned about is the people they need to persuade, convince, coming to their own conclusions about what Semitism is.
Yeah, they don't want to separate the two.
Power away.
They want to create one concept and not two concepts. Now, these are things that most people don't really think about, because if you're into bants online or you're just talking to people saying the word anti-white, you don't really think about it. But these are something I only started thinking about, well, years back, is seeing the articles and trying it both ways and looking around. I don't think it hurt in getting out a particular concept, but there's a time when you want to start tightening it down because the enemy's obviously noticed something. They're trying to counter things that they really can't counter other than saying, well, it didn't happen, or kind of like they do with South African white genocide. It's not really, it's just a problem with crime all over the country.
Yes.
Magically disappearing whites. And then you come down to the various different articles discussing anti-white, and they're constantly breaking it up with anti-white racism or something like that. They're muddying the waters when we want just one simple concept. So I think that is relevant, especially if you're turning out material every day, and you notice these things and are starting to look at it a little bit harder. If you looked at it over the years from a particular perspective, on exactly what their next steps are and what we should do regarding capitalization. Because in a normal country, you wouldn't capitalize black or white. I mean, we historically didn't, but then all of a sudden they're capitalizing everything but white.
Yeah.
And you will rarely see a news article, even maybe those from good intention, but still they're not, they're going to put a hyphen in. And not most people, there are a lot of people that understand what it's referring to. But I do agree with you on in so much that you have a president of the United States opening up an Oval Office to these particular concepts, and it might be time to tighten that one down,
yes.
To not give them room to breathe, anti-white racisms or just muddying the water, which is what they like to do.
Yeah.
If they can't mess with something, they like to muddy the water and throw other concepts in with it. Same thing with the Jewish groups. I mean, they've got a big problem after October 7th when they're walking around annihilating a group of people, and they presented themselves as the biggest victims on the planet. But they're doing that to another group of people in a very, very aggressive fashion. And they're trying to tighten down their particular words. So I understand why they're doing it. One concept, they want to control the concept. But, it's something that I've had to think about over the years. If you're blasting this stuff out, you want to do it probably in the most effective way, or in a way that's the simplest. I think it's just simple stuff.
Yeah,
it is something you could argue back. I've seen arguments from some very bright people back and forth, and you could certainly have them. Mm-hmm. But I think, like I said, the enemy uses the hyphen.
Exactly.
And they're combining it with racism, and there's just not what we want. We want one concept that is ingrained in their heads, and the quickest distance between 2 points is the straightest line. So that's my opinion.
Well, and there's also the element to this that the style guides, the official style guides for the United States, at least, have been over the past 10 years moving toward the de-hyphenization of words. Says here for those two specific style guides, noticeable trend in English toward fewer hyphenated words, with many instances formerly requiring hyphens now being written without them. The shift is driven by a preference for simplicity and clarity, as well as evolving style guides. And the two particular style guides, if people wanted to look them up, are Strunk and White's The Elements of Style, or otherwise the New York Style, and then the Chicago Manual of Style. Those are the two primary sources for the style guides for the English language. And like I said, the trend for de-hyphenization has been going on for about 10 years now. And you're going to continue to see fewer and fewer, except hyphens, except in those cases where they're compound words and they're required for clarity. Otherwise, they're moving toward a simpler look for the language.
Yeah, it is autistic. Global chat said this is autistic. Yeah, some of this stuff is very autistic. But at the same time, if you're driving messages out there and headlines, might as well get autistic, or someone's going to get autistic over it. But definitely not for everyone, this type of discussion. But I'm just curious myself what your thoughts were, because I've dealt with this for so long. And I do notice how the enemy uses stuff, and I assume they're doing things for a reason. And they themselves, it's kind of like, do as we say, not as we do type of thing.
Yeah, so
they're taking the hyphens out of their important concepts and putting them in ours. Yeah, so, people don't take this type of thing seriously, but after seeing headline after headline, I'm like, okay. You can look at it a couple different ways. If you're just blasting stuff out there at the beginning, that's one thing. But then, of course, there comes a time when you start seeing a pattern develop over and over again, and you start wondering what's the best way. And it is autistic. There's no doubt about that.
Well, and it's important. I mean, you're an old veteran at this, and you are concerned with, where the machinery of our social dynamism is headed. I mean, it's like a drag car heading down the track. You want to get into, the Tim Murdocks of the world want to get in under the hood. They want to look at the drivetrain. They want to see how everything's functioning. Can something be improved? And then, of course, the general public, they're looking at the paint job on the outside, and they're like, well, what's the big deal if it's one paint job or another paint job? Well, it's a really big deal when you understand where you end up leading people. And I'll just refer people back to the beginning of this conversation, and the focus being on how does our audience, our brothers and sisters, white brothers and sisters out there, how do they interpret what they read from the works that we are creating? Are we leading them in a direction that makes it easier for us to convince them to concern themselves with our victimization as a people and therefore themselves? Or are we leading them in a direction that's going to make it harder for us to persuade and convince them to concern themselves with our victimization as a people and therefore their victimization as individual members of that people?
Well, my concern is that from a little bit different angle, because like we say, just give us the headlines. We don't care about anything else. And so if I'm quoted, I want to say, no, anti-white, capitalize A, capitalize W, no hyphen, because that's, it makes it clear if there's two ways to present something. You've got a lot of intelligent people like, wait a minute, why are they presenting it different? Anti-white racism over here, these guys are just saying anti-white, no hyphen. Yeah. And you want to differentiate, especially if everyone's trying to, this is a very important point, if everyone's trying to look the part and sound the part, you want to differentiate the real from the fakes. Yeah. And one of the ways to do that is language and action, because, there's a lot of language, there's not a lot of action, and from quote unquote right wingers. And so the devil's in the detail kind of thing. Something most people don't think about, something I have to think about, I guess. Yeah. But it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Let's move on here, and I appreciate you commenting on that. I was just curious. Because the language police for no white guilt are out there, and you constantly in my comments, and I don't get upset at it because my English is terrible, and the spell checkers are murdering us on any given day. And so, I'm like, okay, let's have on Jason. Let's talk about this, because it's something I've thought about, not just starting today. But we have a whole entire movement. You have about, in America, we've been under, I don't know, some type of racial warfare post-1965, maybe even slightly before. Now it seems like there's a whole lot of people, articles being written, comments being made, comedians. It's from every single direction. Even blacks are coming down on blacks. It's from every single direction. And we have this word that's taboo. It hasn't always been taboo. Bob Whitaker, the late Bob Whitaker, had an interesting evolution of the word, the hard R word, the word the nigger, N-I-G-G-E-R, the taboo word. And his, which I had never heard before other than him, that it was an outgrowth of the word nigra in the South, and they really can't say that word.
Oh.
nigra or niga or whatever, nigra, and it was an outgrowth, and that's where it kind of went to the hard R from that. But that was just the way they just couldn't pronounce that particular word. The way Southerners speak, and I had never heard that before. And he said that the tack on the word was basically an extension attack on them, and they were trying to control language and everything else, which is very effective. If you say it, typically the local black, whoever's around, gets a hunting license from our elites. They don't really have any power. They've been given this power post-65 to mess with these words from African to black to African American, and then, of course, the word Negro. On and on we can go. And of late, there's been an outburst of this type of thing. This is the Telegraph: racial slurs, alien sex, the shockingly funny return of politically incorrect comedy. We have that. You have a famous VTuber. VTuber Kirsch goes viral for seemingly defending Shiloh Hendricks fundraiser. And you have this type of thing going on. You have Shiloh Hendricks, of course, is the famous case. Now, historically, we've seen this type of thing before. We've just never seen anyone raise $800,000 over it. She became kind of a online litmus test. Now, of course, NAACP, now this is timely stuff. I'm pulling stuff from the last 24 hours. NAACP calls for legal action against Shiloh Hendricks, family of child reference in viral video release statement. They're responding to a statement she made. I've read your books. You have a great deal of empathy for the average white. There's no doubt about that. From reading the books, what was your take on this? Because it seems like it evolved. To me, it was just a white woman in a park at a particular time. It got a lot of attention online. She had 2 babies. Had she not had 2 babies with her, a little kid with her, had she not had a Somali pressing her in broken English, it wouldn't have been the same. But the fact that she had little babies, the fact that they were pressing her, most people know, if you're online for any length of time, we're dealing with IQs about the same as the chairs we're sitting on. When it comes to Somalis, it's really bad in somewhere like Minnesota. And a lot of people felt a great deal of empathy for this white woman. And it wasn't even about the language or anything like that. It was just like, she's being pressed. She has babies. This is too much. And they just, flooded it.
Yeah, when I covered this, I don't know if you noticed or not, but I took quite a little bit of flack because I'm thinking, as you point out there, about the average white person. I'm thinking about what they're going to end up suffering, what her children, for example, could have ended up suffering. My conclusion was that there were 6 or so really positive reasons to be supporting Shiloh Hendricks, and that I believe, speculating that the majority of people who gave money to Shiloh Hendricks did so out of one of those or more positive reasons. Something like the white woman who is being attacked and she's alone with her children and she needs some help. That's a really positive thing. A knee-jerk reaction to come to the aid of one of our own when we're being attacked and slandered and threatened. An objection also to being censored into oblivion, losing her job, being chased out of her community, this sort of thing. All positive reasons there. I think probably the biggest factor was the blowback from Carmelo Anthony and white people, not only across the country, but around the world, watched as he had murdered Austin Metcalf and says he did it, although now, of course, he's saying that it was self-defense, but saying that he did it, and then his Give Sin Go being flooded with people who were delighted that a white young man had been killed and saying as much, so radical, fanatical anti-whites, and many of them seemingly or potentially likely to be blacks financially gifting. You saw a lot of small donations that came in and I guess continue to come in to Carmelo. And I think a lot of white people were motivated by that as well, to do the right thing and help out a white sister in need. And that as a consequence, they knew very little about Shiloh. They knew very little about the interaction. Some probably didn't even know that she had referred to this guy with that slur and to the child with the slur. They were just coming to support a white woman, and I think that's really a positive thing and something that we can feel really good about the future. White people reacting this way. There was a much louder element that I criticized in these circles, who were saying that anti-whiteism, white guilt, is defeated by saying this N word, and therefore we should celebrate it, and then therefore it will be repeated by others. And the argument, actually, the argument that I heard most often probably is that encapsulated by what somebody wrote to me. They said, Jason, saying N represents more than just saying the word. It represents breaking through a boundary of socially pressured self-censorship. Well, I asked a couple of questions when it came to that, like, are all boundaries the same? And of course they're not. Do all boundaries block the way to the recapture of our destiny? Of course they do not. But more importantly, I think that if that logic were true, then we would have to start referring to all handicapped children as retards, all mixed race children as mongrels, all Jewish children, with the K word, all Asian children with the G word, all Hispanic children with the S word. And what kind of white people do you think really are going to be attracted to that? Are we going to be winning over healthy, normative?
Here's the thing. I don't even see that as, like, other than some online people, I don't even see that as realistic. You always have these online elements taking things to the extreme, but they rarely do anything in real life. I mean, outside of the online.
Exactly.
The online does lead the way. I mean, Jim Goad's a big fan of the hard R. I've had him on the show. He has his particular reasons. His statement was the whole entire country was destroyed over the word nigger. That was his particular reason, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of funny. This particular word is a word that only recently became off limits. It doesn't go back that far. Obviously, if you're, I think the general challenge is that every one of these situations are a little bit different. Some of them are a lot different. Like the situation I was reading on your timeline right before the show, you have a white guy calling blacks the hard R, calling the word nigger in Mississippi. I mean, this guy's running around he goes into an all black bar and starts yelling the hard R. I think he even grabbed a mic at one time, and then he gets the hell beat out of him. I mean, I really don't compare that to Shiloh Hendricks. They're a woman with a baby, post a very big incident, black on white crime incident, a woman at a park with a baby where people say enough's enough. I don't see her like going into the park to start problems and stuff like that. I don't think anyone viewed it that way.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this guy's mentally ill. I'm looking at Tariq Nasheed's timeline. I don't know if he's mentally ill. I mean, if you're going into a bar or a park full of Somalis and you're looking to scream epithets, and there's a variety of different things she could have screamed, by the way. She didn't say porch monkey. She didn't say spear chucker. She didn't say anything. She went to the hard R. But there's a variety of different things she could have screamed to put her in the same spot. Let's face it. But I just don't see it as the same thing. And obviously, if you're a white guy, you're going to an all black bar. You're not armed to the teeth. You're not ready for Armageddon, Rohawa, whatever you want to call it. And you're looking for problems. That's one thing. We've always seen cases like this, though. And they always end up the same way. Then a one-off event that I don't think will happen again ever the same way, where you have a white woman at a park that becomes like a litmus test online, for collective white action. Like, we got to support her, So I just see it in very simple terms.
That's what I think the distinction is, that the word here is not relevant for that support for Shiloh Hendricks, in my opinion. The word and the celebration of the word is going to cause people, the use of the word, and this illogical notion that it's going to somehow liberate white people, is going to cause the consequence that we saw for this white guy in Mississippi. Also, this Jewish guy, Avi Racklin, who immediately tried to imitate and make money off of the use of the word, and immediately lost his job.
Yeah, people thought that was a setup. They thought he was doing that just to mess around. This is the problem now with online, that everyone else is going to be a pretender to Shiloh, which is one reason you don't want. I mean, if you think you're going to do it for money, it just doesn't work that way. This is a one-off event. I mean, we could have others, but it's going to have to be something genuine. I think if she wouldn't have the kids, it wouldn't have ended up the same way. But probably wouldn't have been at a park for little kids.
Right.
But it was just one of those incidents where people said enough, because many people, not just in America, it seems like on the planet, have had it with certain black behavior traits.
Well, and there you're talking, you're pointing out one of my arguments again with it, which is that it's not white focused to say enter. In fact, it's multiracial. And as you pointed out when we were talking earlier, there are even a bunch of blacks now who are coming in and saying, oh, well, it's not just whites, it's not just Asians, it's even us. We've got a problem with it. So we actually articulated exactly what questions would be asked next. And it has all come like dominoes to fruition. When you begin with this focus on another race of people, in this case, it's blacks. When you begin with that focus, the next step is who all and else agrees with this, who all and else is scared of blacks and scared of them acting up and attacking them like this. Well, then it ends up being everybody. Then you find out black people even disagree with that behavior. And then those people, because they're black, they end up getting pushed to the fore. Meanwhile, as these questions are being asked, and then the next one is, why does some blacks act like that? And then white people begin debating with black people, what happened to their families? Inevitably, this works its way back around to how has white people created environments that cause blacks to have no parents, or to have, is it because conservative ideals that we're either too hard on these people or too easy on them? Meanwhile,
yeah, I don't
want
to.
That question, hold on, let me just finish this point. While that question is being discussed the entire time, brother, no one's thinking about us. No one is thinking about protecting our environments so that we don't have to deal with these kind of people. And the only way to do that, of course, is through the recapture of our destiny. So out of the Shiloh episode, where it began, where there was a lot of positivity, as I said, like 6 or so reasons to positively endorse this woman, and not for the reckless behavior that endangered herself and children, which is what it was. It was reckless and endangerment. Out of that moment where it started, the entire conversation afterward has been about blacks and who among us doesn't like blacks, and how bad are the blacks? Why are the blacks bad? That's not a conversation about our people and us being victimized. That's definitely not a defeat of white guilt, which a lot of these people who are fans of the, let's just say enter from now on, it defeats white guilt. And you pointed out what you said, and what you said that Go said is an argument for my position, that the entire United States used this word. Your little sister used this word to describe black people. Your grandmammy, everybody called blacks by this word up until when we were 90+% white. Up until recently, I shared a video on my stream of the head of the Republican Party in the 80s using this word when he was talking to other people in the Republican Party on video. And so you had everybody using this word up until recently, and yet look at where we are today. Look at how everything has gotten worse since long before 1965, and when people were all using this word forever, all the way up through all of that time, it keeps getting worse. If using, and it's obviously illogical, but if we were to just take it out of the situation where it's clearly illogical, because you'd have to then say that, well, saying all of these other ugly things to all of these other groups would magnify the effect. Even if you took it out of that illogicality, you're still left with the reality that everyone used it, and yet everything has still gotten bad. So how can it be a remedy? That's the argument, one of the arguments that I've made.
I think one of the challenges with this type of really like breaking things down words and context in the social space, because I could go into the arguments behind why white genocide wasn't hyphenated, which worked out very well, not hyphenating it, by the way. It worked out amazingly well. But we're at a point where a lot of people, this is from Justice Report, white men arrested after exchanging racial slurs with black women during a road rage incident, which is typically what happens. You've got to keep your head while everyone else is losing theirs, or be prepared to go to jail. Every once in a while, shit just happens. Especially, I find women defending their children are likely to do anything if they think their children are in danger.
Oh, yeah.
It's no different than animals or anything else. But how do you keep attention down this particular road when you have so many white people that have just had it? Because forget about all the small talk. We've just had it. I don't care about all that. I just want to say the word nigger. You know, that's what it comes down to. Almost.
What I've said to so many people who are online, who were celebrating the use of the word, which endangered her, and that's where my first post started, endangered her and her children. And I said that was extremely irresponsible, because there'll be Shilohs of the future. Yes, she walked away from this, but you're not considering the Shilohs of the future. If you're going to celebrate this behavior and endanger the Shilohs of the future, it means you don't care about those Shilohs. And if you really desperately want to say, I'm not going to stop you, put the video camera on your face, on your real face, go out in public, go ahead and use it. Don't just celebrate it online. Don't just celebrate this revenge porn by way of a little tiny woman with her beautiful little white babies who acted really irrationally in that moment and jeopardized herself and the children. Don't just celebrate that and get off on that. Use your real name. Go out in public like this guy did in Mississippi. Go find a group of blacks and start saying it, because if that defeats white guilt, if that defeats our shackles that are preventing us from recapturing our destiny, which is preposterous, of course. But if you really just want to say it in the final analysis, well, then go get us some videos. Brother, you're not going to be surprised. Not a single one of the people that I challenged to do that has returned with a video of themselves, their faces and names, going out to a bunch of adult black males, or even one, physically fit black male, and calling them by this to free themselves. So this is just, I see people wanting to blow off steam. I see jealous people. I see people who are getting off on revenge porn. And if people want to do that, that's fine. But the claims that it turns back white guilt, or it defeats anti-whiteism, it defeats, and it's one of our, one of the shackles, then you have to take it to its logical consequences. You can't just stay anonymous online. You've got to go out and call all of the handicapped children retards too. The anti-whites don't want you to do that. But I will remind folks what I said earlier, that not every boundary that is set by anti-whites blocks the path to our redemption. And the notion that it does is elementary. It's abecedarian. It's puerile. It's childish. It is this idea that if you thumb your nose like a child at the establishment, you're somehow walking things back into a past that no longer exists. And the reality, of course, is, I know you know this, that you can't get back to the reclamation of our destiny. You can't get to us controlling our destiny by trying to go backwards in time. You can only go forward. It's like with a police officer who pulls you over and then maybe incorrectly with the law takes your firearm. You got a firearm on you. It's legal. But he decides he's going to take it because he's a jerk, or he doesn't understand the law in that moment. Maybe he had a bad day. And it's like trying to fight with the cop over your firearm to get it back from the cop. There is a path to recapturing your firearm, and it's not at that moment. It's not with that police officer. So just because a path is blocked doesn't mean that it's blocking our route to the recapture of our destiny. And there are so many examples that we could give, analogies that we could give of that. But again, like to your question, if people want to go, they want to go say this word, If they're going to celebrate white people doing it, and then we can see the consequences, like with this guy here, who knows, he got a broken jaw. I think they sodomized him as well with some things after they stripped him naked and put him on the ground. If they want to see more of that, then let them be the first to put themselves on video and go do that. And I promise you, brother, there ain't not one are going to be doing that. So when they come around and they have criticism for the folks out there who are saying, hey, let's care about each other, let's focus on each other. When they come out, you can see how invalid the criticism is.
Yeah, I just think in the middle of a war, you got to pick a side. That's kind of why I picked her side. I mean, I can totally see. I can totally see that the average. There was a time in America, in the South, whereas if you use foul language in front of women and children, let's say you're at a bank, you're a guy at a bank, people have their families in there, and you use foul language, bad things would happen to you. Very bad things. This is a typical white society. So I understand the framework. The problem is that you have a group of people, the challenge, white people, a rising number that have had it and that have been pushed way too far and that are starting to push back. And I think we have to understand that and try to just work through it and not like step in front of tidal waves.
Well, look, let me point out, and I mean, I agree with you, brother. And I like where you're coming from because you're thinking about.
I think you blinked out and in. You might have to sign out and sign back in because I think it froze. I think the screen froze. No. See if you can jump back in here. There we go. There we go. Sorry.
No worries. I agree with you, brother, and I know where you're coming from. I know you got our people and our well-being at heart, and that's what matters to me. And I can always have a productive and a respectful conversation when I can tell that that's where the person is coming from. So totally understand. And I sided with Shiloh. I think some of the issue is, and I've seen in some of the comments where people said to me things like, can't you cut her some slack because of these situations? And that's a complete misunderstanding of the totality of this situation and my interpretation, because that implies that I'm in some sort of judgment about whether or not she's going to receive punishment or whether or not she's a good person, like she's a student at a school I'm a principal of, and I'm going to take these extenuating circumstances under consideration and then determine whether or not she's going to be punished. That's not what's happening at all. I observed an event like everybody else did, and I endorse and side with her in this event for the reasons that I said were positive, and I felt that other people were endorsing that. At the same time, because I'm concerned about Shiloh and her babies and the Shiloh and her babies to come, I'm going to criticize behavior that is reckless. So you can folks could say with me, well, you're going to criticize the behavior that's probably reasonable or what have you, but I just want to run with the celebration. Well, more power to you. But the arguments about the concept or this word, the slur for blacks being used as liberating us from white guilt and all, this is dangerous. This is really dangerous because people will be injured. And if I said when it came to Shiloh, I want you to think about this too, Tim. If this were your wife and she had your two babies out there, and there was some black guy and she decided to call him and she's all that there is to defend your babies, I would never let her leave the house again. That's insane that she would put my children, this is me thinking about if those were my kids, in danger that way. So we can analyze things rather than it just being a 100% everything about her and everything about that moment is right or wrong. We're supposed to be white. We're supposed to be, like smarter and more nuanced than that.
Yeah,
and like
I think,
I said again,
I think the real title for the book is how to survive and win a race war when the vast majority of whites still don't realize it's occurring. That's the challenge. Global chat. When there are a dozen of us or more, we can do it. He's talking about hard R, I'm guessing. And no one makes a move against us. Blood Tribe doesn't, and blacks are afraid to approach. I think one morning something like that's going to happen. It's going to end up being a shooting war. But this is a point. I'll make some other points about activism that we've noticed over the years as well. After this, I told Jason an hour, and I'm going to let him go and do the show. But that is actually true. There's a lot of things you can do in a group and get away with. Whites in a group got away with overthrowing a king, one of the most powerful kings the world has ever seen. We can do all kinds of things in a group, but again, the title of the book is How to Survive and Win a Race War. When the vast majority of whites, there's still a large number that don't understand it's occurring. That's a challenge, and that's where language comes in. That's where you kind of like need every resource you have, I think.
Well, I don't know if it would be the title of that particular book would be Race War. I think it would probably be an anti-Black war.
Okay.
Because it's multiracial. I mean, there are a lot of people that are afraid of blacks, sick of blacks.
That's true.
And and they're coming together on that basis. And so, yeah, I mean, but here's a very easy prediction though, brother. And thank you so much for having me on. A very easy prediction is that it's not liberating us from white guilt. It's not doing anything for white well-being. And we'll see more people who use this word.
We always have, though. We always have. Yeah. You're saying we're going to see more trying to make money offline on it. There's more for that?
Yeah, possibly some more of that. But we'll see more people, more white people suffering as a consequence, and hopefully not as bad as this guy in Mississippi, or worse, as a consequence of employing tactics that are celebrated online by anonymous people who never actually get involved and do anything productive. And just to this comment here about the blood tribe, the blood tribe were chased away by the black residents up in Ohio just a couple of months back. They were out on the bridge, they were waving their Nazi flags, and they were saying these words, and the blacks started showing up. A couple of cops were there, just a couple of cops, and they weren't going to be able to stop what was going to happen. The blood tribe guys literally ran and dove into the U-Haul they had to get away from what was going to end up happening to them as a consequence. But more importantly, normal white people, the folks we need, are not going to be following the riffraff. White people need a moral matrix to act, and when we have one, we can be very violent. We can overthrow kings. We can wipe out whole countries. We can wipe out whole tribes when we have a moral matrix to act upon.
I find it that whites don't like anything disruptive.
Well, certainly complacent.
They do not like anything disruptive, and we as activists, we always have a saying, memes are like mushrooms. They grow best in the dark. Messaging is like mushrooms, because if it's disruptive at all, one, it gets the enemy's attention. Two, the average white might get irritated. And you just want it to seep into their brain and just start shaking them so that they get irritated with you. And it's a fine dance, if you will, because one of the challenges with street activism on our side of the equation, because we're the out group. No matter what we do, we're the out group. No matter how well you dress, no matter how, and this is not an argument for optics either way, this argument against optics, because it doesn't matter. You're the out group. It doesn't matter how well you look, you're getting called the same names. It doesn't matter what flags you use, you're getting called the same names. It could be a legitimate flag, it could be a flag from World War II, whatever. But this is the problem with street activism. This is the challenge, if you will, is that it is always somewhat disruptive to the ordinary person walking down the street. And whites do not tend to resist, even above average ones, anything disruptive. And so this is the constant challenge with activism. That's what I find.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point, if I could, I will just connect that anti-whites don't want white people talking about the discrimination directed against us in employment, in promotion, in enrollment. They don't want us talking about those things, our victimization as a people, that's very visible. They also don't want us saying enter. Now, one of those paths is going to be productive for the people talking about those things.
I
One
think
of those,
historically, they went a few decades being able to handle the hard R. Then all of a sudden, a white woman at a park with 2 babies says it makes 800 grand. They're like, what? What just happened? They didn't realize that something was occurring the whole time. And they were just, you know.
well, I think there's always going to be, there used to be circuses that traveled the country, carnivals that used to travel the country, and they would put up spectacles of various types. So there's always going to be people willing to buy the spectacle. There's always going to be people, willing to buy the corpse of the whatever to have a look.
That's one of the problems with online is that it really amplifies the spectacle and getting media attention. And that's one of the challenges. This is another challenge. Again, these are just challenges to activism in general.
I agree with that.
So anyways, Jason, I'll let you go. Thank you very much for being a good sport and coming on and explaining.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. We love you and we love the work that you're doing. And thank you so much for doing it. And thank you so much for having your heart in the right place and for the well-being of our people. That's what really matters when it comes right down to it. So it's my pleasure, and I look forward to chatting again.
Cheers. Thank you very much for coming on and being good sport. Cheers.
Cheers, brother.
And thanks you guys for showing up. I'll get to the regular show, and thanks, Jason, for taking time out of your evening and coming on.